and girls. Today we're going to talk all about multiplying decimals. So let's open up our notes packet to the page that says 3-4 multiplying with decimals. So again, just like yesterday, I've written most of the notes out for you, but I want you guys paying attention, so you have to fill in a couple of the key words. So let's go through the steps of how we multiply decimals. It's going to be very different from adding and subtracting in a couple of main ways, so really pay attention to that. So what we have for our steps, step 1. Line up end numbers. So unlike yesterday, we're going to line up the end numbers. It says we are do not line up the decimal points. So do not line up the decimal points. So that's our second one to write on there. So you should have filled out those 2 words. So again, line up the end numbers, do not line up decimal points. Step number 2, multiply as you would with whole numbers, and you're going to ignore the decimal points in the beginning. So after you line up the end numbers, not the decimal points, you're just going to pretend like the decimal points aren't even there, and you're going to do regular multiplication. That's when it starts to get a little bit more tricky. Okay, after you're done with all of your multiplying, you're going to count the total number of decimal points in the numbers. So if my first number had 3 numbers behind the decimal place and my second one had 2, I have 5 numbers total behind the decimal point. This will be the number of decimal places in the product. Remember, product is an answer to a multiplication problem. Number 4 says you're going to count that from the right to the left to place the decimal. Okay, so take a minute, make sure you have all of those missing lines filled in, and you've written down all of the words for the notes. If you need to, pause the video and then come back to our example in a minute. So we're going to go up to the top of the page where you have the big grid lines, and we're going to do one problem together, and you're going to do one problem independently for homework tonight. We're not going to use a calculator for our multiplication. So what we're going to do is we're going to practice this problem together. We're going to do 2.12, which is 2 1200ths, times 3.4, which is 3 4/10. So we're going to line up the end numbers. What do I mean by end numbers? That means I'm going to line up this 4 and this 2. I'm going to line them up next to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down 2.12. I'm not going to line up my decimal points, but I'm going to put the 4 directly below the 2, and I'm going to put my 3.4 right here. So if you notice, my decimals are not in the same spot, and that's okay when I multiply. Sometimes it works out that they end up in the same spot, but most of the time it does not. What I want to make sure is that my last numbers end up next to each other. So now I'm going to multiply just like I normally would if there was no decimals there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by multiplying with the 4. 4 times 2 is 8, so I write down my 8. There's nothing to carry. 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8 again. Now I'm going to multiply and just focus on the 3. Now, because the 3 is starting one number over, remember how I have to put this 0 here? Because again, I'm starting in the second column, so I want my numbers to start right there. So I would do 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 times 2 is 6 again. From here, the next step is to add together my numbers. This is again how I normally would multiply. So I have an 8, I have a 10, so I'll write down the 0, carry the 1. 8 plus 1 is 9, plus 3 more is 12, write down the 2, carry the 1, and then I get a 7 right there. So right now I have 7208. My last thing to do is the most complicated. It's how to figure out where the decimal point would go. When I look at my first number, I have 2 numbers behind the decimal place. In my second number, I have just 1 number behind my decimal place. So total, I have 3 numbers behind the decimal place. So in my answer, I need to have 3 numbers behind my decimal. So I'm going to start over from the right, and I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3 numbers, and that's where my decimal point's going to go. Again, the number of decimal points in my problem is the same number of decimal points that should be in my answer. 3 decimal places in my 2 numbers I multiply together, so 3 in my answer as well. That's how we're going to go through multiplying decimals. What I want you guys to do is I want you guys to practice one now on your own. So My numbers are 25.7, 25 and 7/10 times 41 hundredths, 0.41. What I'd like you guys to do is write this down on your paper. Remember lining up the end numbers and follow your steps and try to come up with this answer without a calculator. We'll check it in class tomorrow to see if you were able to get it correct. Okay, hope you liked the video. See you in class tomorrow.